Take this, woman. Old Man Jonah thundered, his voice vibrating against the mud walls. The small oil lamp flickered from the force of it. He stretched out a brown bottle toward Grace Okafor, its contents dark and restless. Drop it twice in the pot whilst cooking, he said, eyes blazing, and you will be number one. Grace's fingers trembled as she reached for it. Sweat rolled down her temple, glistening in the dim light. Her lips parted, but no words came, only the dry taste of fear. The old man's laughter broke the silence, sharp, manic, echoing through the small room like metal striking stone. Go, woman, go, he barked, waving her off. Grace clutched the bottle to her chest and stumbled out into the night. The door slammed behind her with a thud that sounded like a warning. Somewhere in the darkness, thunder muttered, soft, distant, and waiting. The market was bustling, as it always was, but Grace Okafor felt invisible amidst the noise. She stood by her pot, stirring the thick stew with a wooden spoon, but no one came. The heat pressed down on her skin, sweat trickling down her neck, but her mind was elsewhere. Her stall, once crowded with customers, now sat empty, save for the few who passed without a second glance. The other vendors mocked her silently, their laughter like the hum of flies circling rotting fruit. If only I could feed my son better, she thought, wiping her forehead. If only I could escape this life. Her hands shook as she stirred, the familiar weight of poverty settling deeper into her bones. Each day felt like a battle lost before it even began. Her son, Daniel, had just come home from school, and once again, there was no food for him. She could see the disappointment in his eyes when he sat at the table, waiting for her to produce something, anything, to feed him. Her heart tightened with guilt. What kind of mother am I, she wondered. She had promised him a better life, but all she could offer was hunger. That was when she heard the whisper. There's a way out. The voice came not from the air but from a corner of her own mind, where fear and hope collided. She had heard the rumors of Old Man Jonah, the herbalist on the outskirts of the city, the man who could make your dreams come true, for a price. The thought was both terrifying and tempting. What did she have to lose? Everything, it seemed, was slipping through her fingers. Just one visit, she muttered to herself. Just one visit. Without another word, she left her stall, walking toward the unknown. The sun was setting, casting long shadows over the streets as she approached the edge of the city, where the noise of the market faded and the air grew heavier, as though the earth itself was holding its breath. The smell of incense and burnt herbs filled the air as she neared the small hut. What will it cost me, she wondered, but the question felt too late. She had already made her choice. The door of Old Man Jonah's hut creaked as Grace pushed it open. The air inside was thick with the scent of herbs, damp earth, and something sharper, darker. Jonah sat cross-legged in the center of the room, his eyes narrow and wise, like those of a snake preparing to strike. He didn't look up as she entered, but the silence in the room seemed to grow heavier, pressing in on her chest. "Why do you come?" he asked, his voice low, like the rumble of thunder far away. Grace swallowed hard, trying to ignore the cold sweat running down her back. She could feel the weight of his gaze, even without seeing it. I need to change my life," she whispered. "My son, he deserves more." Her voice cracked, the words tasting bitter on her tongue. Jonah remained still, his face unreadable. After a moment, he reached for a small bottle on the floor beside him, its contents dark and unsettling. The light from the oil lamp flickered as he handed it to Grace, the bottle glinting in the dim light. "Take it," he said, his voice firm. "Drop 2 drops in the pot, while you cook, and you will rise above them all. The food will have power, and you will be number one." Grace's hands shook as she took the bottle, her fingers brushing against his. His skin was cold, like the shadows of the night, and for a moment, she felt a chill run through her entire body. She stared at the bottle, her mind racing. The room was spinning, her breath shallow. She knew what she was about to do. She could feel the weight of it pressing on her chest. "Is this the only way?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. Jonah's smile was thin, almost predatory. He nodded slowly. "You were born for this," he murmured, the words as soft and sharp as the edge of a blade. "Go, woman. Go. Your path has already been chosen." Grace turned, her body trembling, and left the hut. The door slammed shut behind her with a finality that echoed in her bones. The wind stirred around her, but there was no relief. Only the heavy weight of the bottle in her hands. The next morning, Grace stood over her pot, the familiar scent of spices filling the air. Daniel sat at the table, his eyes hopeful as he waited for breakfast, but she barely saw him. Her thoughts were consumed with the small bottle she had clutched tightly in her hand all night. She had barely slept, turning the decision over and over in her mind, but now, with the rising sun casting a warm glow over her stall, she knew there was no turning back. With trembling hands, she opened the bottle and let the dark liquid fall into the pot, 2 drops, just as old man Jonah had said. As the liquid hit the boiling stew, the air seemed to thicken, the steam rising in a sudden, intense burst. Grace stepped back, her heart racing. She waited, watching the pot, feeling the energy in the air shift. What if it works, she wondered. What if it really changes everything? The moment felt heavy, as though the world itself held its breath. The aroma of the stew became richer, sharper, more intoxicating. Grace stirred it carefully, not wanting to disturb the magic, though she couldn't quite explain what she was feeling. By noon, the stall was crowded. Word had spread like wildfire, as though the market had been waiting for something to change. Customers flocked to her, asking for bowls, praising the taste with every bite. "This stew," one woman said, "it's like nothing I've ever tasted before." Another man stood up after finishing his meal, a wide grin on his face. "I feel alive again. What have you put in this?" Grace felt the power coursing through her, an unfamiliar confidence replacing her usual weariness. The more she served, the more her heart swelled. For the first time in years, she wasn't invisible. The whispers grew louder, and soon, people started calling it spirit stew. It wasn't just food, it was a potion, a magic that made you feel alive in ways you couldn't explain. The money began to flow, customers lined up, and soon, the stall that had once been the smallest in the market became the busiest, by far. But even as she counted her coins with a sense of triumph, there was a quiet voice in her head, faint but persistent. "This is too much. Too easy." She glanced down at the pot, where the steam still rose in heavy clouds. "What's the price?" she wondered, but the answer didn't come. All she could hear were the voices of those who praised her, the clinking of coins, and the hum of life returning to her world. As the days passed, Grace Okafor's stall became the heart of the market. Her spirit stew was the talk of Lagos, the secret behind the sudden success of the poor, the weary, and the sick. But as the praises came, so did the whispers. Rivals like Martha, who had once mocked her for her humble beginnings, now approached her with hesitant smiles. "Grace," Martha said one morning, her voice laced with curiosity, "how did you do it? Tell us the secret. You've changed everything. Even I can see it." Grace glanced at her, the same woman who used to look down on her, and felt a strange, distant pride swelling inside her. She straightened up, wiping her hands on her apron as the steam from the pot rose to greet her. For a moment, she almost forgot the price she had paid. "It's God's will," Grace said, her voice steady but distant. "Trust in God, Martha. Stay focused, stay motivated, and never give up. Hard work pays off." Martha, hesitant but desperate, nodded slowly, her eyes filled with more than just admiration, there was fear there too. The kind of fear that only came when one saw the rapid rise of another. The market was starting to change, and it was changing because of Grace. But the changes weren't just in the food. More of her rivals came to her in the days that followed. They, too, wanted to know the secret, how she had transformed from a struggling food seller into the queen of the market. Yet, Grace only told them the same thing: trust in God. Stay motivated. But in her heart, she knew it wasn't just God. It wasn't just hard work. There was something else, something she couldn't explain. And as the people lined up for their bowls, she glanced down at the bottle she still kept hidden beneath the counter, the one that had started it all. Each day, as the money grew and the power swelled, Grace felt a strange emptiness creeping in, like the walls of the market were closing in around her. She could feel the heat of the curse, even in the triumph of her success. Daniel arrived home that afternoon, hungry from school. Grace was busy behind the stall, her mind preoccupied with the ever-growing crowd of customers. The market had become a constant hum, a rhythm she couldn't escape. She had been so focused on her success, on the weight of the coins in her pocket, that she barely noticed the time slipping by. As usual, Daniel, still in his uniform, walked in, dropping his school bag on the floor with a tired sigh. "Mom," he called, but Grace didn't hear him. The pot was on the fire, steaming, waiting for its next customer. "Mom!" Daniel called again, louder this time, hunger in his voice. He walked to the stove, not noticing the 2 drops she had secretly added that morning, the same drops that had turned her life upside down. He reached for the ladle, scooping a generous portion into a bowl. He was so used to the smell now, the rich aroma of the stew, that he never questioned it. He sat down at the table and began to eat. By the time the first neighbor, Mrs. Adebayo, saw him, it was too late. She was sweeping her compound across the street, when her eyes caught him through the open window. Daniel, sitting there, eating like it was the most normal thing in the world. But then the color drained from his face. His lips turned dark. He stood up quickly, stumbling, his hands clutching his stomach as though in pain. His body went stiff, and before Mrs. Adebayo could shout for help, he collapsed onto the floor with a soft thud. Panic set in immediately. Mrs. Adebayo screamed, and other neighbors rushed into the room. "Grace! Grace!" they cried, running toward the market as fast as they could. Grace, who had been serving customers, froze when she heard the shout. "Grace! Your son!" The words hit her like a thunderclap. Her heart stopped for a moment before she dashed toward the exit, her feet barely touching the ground. Grace ran. Her wrapper came loose as her feet pounded the dirt road, her breath sharp and uneven. The voices behind her grew louder, echoing through the narrow alleys. "Grace! Your son! Come quick!" The words refused to make sense. Her mind spun, grasping at the hope that it was a mistake, that Daniel had only fainted, that everything would still be fine. But deep down, something inside her already knew. When she burst through the door, the world fell silent. Daniel lay on the floor, his school uniform wrinkled, his small hand clutching the wooden table leg as if trying to hold on to something, to life, to her. His lips were dark, his eyes half open, staring at nothing. Grace fell to her knees beside him, shaking his shoulders. "Daniel! Daniel, wake up! It's me," she cried, her voice breaking. She pressed her ear to his chest, nothing. Not even the faintest whisper of breath. The neighbors stood at the doorway, watching in frightened silence. One of them murmured, "He ate from the pot, Grace, the pot you sell from." The words hit her like a blade. She turned toward the stove. The pot still sat there, half full, steam curling lazily into the air. The same stew that had made her rich, respected, envied, now lay before her like a coffin. Grace screamed. It wasn't a sound of pain but of something deeper, a sound that clawed at heaven itself. She tore at her clothes, shaking her head. No. No, he didn't know. He didn't know. But there was no mercy left in the room. Only the smell of food and death. By the time dusk settled, Grace was gone from the market. No one saw her leave, but the whispers began, that she had run into the forest, barefoot and wild-eyed, clutching a small bottle. The road to Old Man Jonah's hut was the same, but tonight it felt different, heavier, darker. The crickets had fallen silent, as though the earth itself feared her coming. When she reached the hut, the lamp inside was already burning. He had been expecting her. Grace burst through the door, her face streaked with tears and dust. "You must help me," she screamed. "He's dead, my son is dead. You have to bring him back." Jonah didn't move. He sat in the same spot as before, cross-legged, calm. His eyes met hers, cold and knowing. "I told you," he said quietly. "Venom does not know its master." Grace shook her head violently, falling to her knees. "Please. I'll give you anything. Take my life instead." Jonah's expression didn't change. "You were warned. You took from the pot of spirits and fed your own blood. The charm did what it was made to do." Grace screamed again, this time like an animal. She lunged forward, grabbing at his feet, but he drew back, his gaze unflinching. "Go," he said, voice rising. "The spirits have already taken what they came for. There is no trade left to make." Her body trembled. She looked at him one last time, at the man who had given her the bottle, at the promise that had destroyed her. Then she turned and fled into the night, her cries echoing through the trees. By morning, the market women saw her wandering the streets, barefoot, her hair wild, her eyes empty. She muttered the same words over and over. "Don't let your blood eat, don't let your blood eat." Children followed her from a distance, whispering, pointing. Her once famous stall now sat abandoned, the pot overturned, flies buzzing lazily above the cold stew. And in the days that followed, the story of Grace Okafor, the woman who cooked spirit stew, spread through Lagos like a ghost, a warning carried in hushed voices. The hand that feeds with blood will one day taste its own sorrow. Before you sell your soul, be ready to bear the consequences just like Grace.